Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome.
How are you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So we'll guess we'll get started in a little bit. And you got the agenda for the evening, right?
Yep. Yeah, all good. And then
Pat, you're in your office.
Still on mute.
I'm muted. There you go.
There we go. So do I have to? Okay, so you can't unmute yourself. Do we have it set up that you can come in unmuted?
If you would have set it up, it might be, they might be muted when they come in.
Okay, didn't realize that. Okay, well, we'll figure it
But
out.
when I do the introductions, I'll ask everyone to mute themselves.
Okay.
Rick, how you been?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there. You know,
I know.
We're just trying to get to the finish line here of Thanksgiving. So it's we have classes Monday, Tuesday, and then send everybody home until after the new year. So it's tough, but
yeah,
our basketball schedule is changing by the minute. So
yeah, I saw that there was just and just changing the schedules, and that's where we are now because we just dealing with a little bit of that ourselves, with winter sports. So that is here attending. We do have a few more that will come in, but I would take the time to introduce myself and the program. My name is Pat Weber. I'm the athletic director here at North Hills. Along with us tonight, joining us in this program is Mr. Rick Christensen from Duquesne University. He's an assistant athletic director and works in compliance, as well as Mrs. Deb Davis, who is a counselor here at the high school for 11th and 12th graders. And she also is firsthand has been involved with the recruiting aspect. As if some of you just heard our conversation, her son had committed to play lacrosse at Bryant University this past, I guess he's starting this year. So she's been firsthand in the recruiting experience. So her information is valuable as we go through here. We do have an agenda tonight. We'll just run through. Mr. Christensen is going to run through some different things, talking about NCAA compliance at the different levels and what they are looking for, as well as some of the COVID-19 different modifications that we've had throughout this pandemic in the recruiting world, as well as with grading scales and whatnot. After that, Mrs. Davis will talk about here our program at the high school, and then I'll finish up with some recruiting information and some tips for everyone. As we go, we are going to record this session, so if you want to go back and watch it, we'll have it available. We want to make that available to all of our families that wouldn't be able to be here tonight. As we go through the presentation, if you use the chat feature on your Zoom, if you have a question, we'll try to keep up with those as much as possible. We will have time at the end as well for a question and answer session, so we can address some of the concerns that might have come out of the presentation. But hopefully you find this valuable for the next probably hour or so. We try to give you as much information as we can. If you do have individual concerns about your son or daughter, obviously we ask you to keep those, and maybe Mrs. Davis and I can address those individual concerns or questions that you may have at a later date, or setting up a phone call with us is ideal, so we don't take up the time of the Zoom presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mr. Christensen, and he's going to share his screen, and it'll be his turn up to go through his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. I appreciate that. Let's see here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm going to run through just a quick presentation, just an overview of mainly what I deal with on a regular basis, working at Duquesne University in our athletic department in our compliance office. I'll really deal with the NCAA on a regular basis, whether it's for our current student athletes or incoming prospective student athletes. So hopefully you find this helpful. I want to give you an overview of the Ncaa in general, talk a little bit about the Eligibility Center process from a timeline standpoint, and then get into all the requirements that the Ncaa has for Ncaa Division I and II student athletes. We'll talk about, obviously, in this day and age now, we've got to deal with COVID-19 and how that impacts everything. And it also does impact the eligibility process. And then I'll give you some points at the end and wrap it up with some financial aid updates. But always appreciate talking to groups of, whether it's high school students or high school parents. It's one of those things where this information is pretty common for myself, dealing with it every day, but have realized over the years, the Ncaa puts a lot of responsibility back onto parents and student athletes that are in high school to kind of work through this. Now, the advent of technology with the internet and all the great resources that are out there, there is some great guidance for everyone. But this hopefully gives you an overview of it, can help you out in the process, and then give you a resource. If you've got questions, I'm always open to, whether it's questions tonight or in the future. My contact information is available, and can help out along the way, because it's great to at least have answers in a confusing process itself. So I'll just jump in as far as the expectations for college student athletes, regardless of where someone sees themselves or aspires to play at the collegiate level. My advice always is just find the right fit. Don't be enamored with Division I athletes in general. There could be a better situation at Division II, III, or even junior college level that's meeting all your needs. The college choice kind of ties in academics, athletics, social, financial, and geographical needs too, which will be expanded on more by Mr. Weber, Mrs. Davis. But when you're dealing with the recruiting opportunities, there can be different ways that you can have access to coaches and be seen by individuals that are making those decisions at the college level. But I think it's important in general, whether it's a session like this or when you're going through the decision-making process, to surround yourself with those people that are in tune with your process, your family, your coaches, anyone that you're dealing with at your schools, even the individuals that are recruiting you at the college level. I'll talk to our coaches a lot and say, be the resource for your recruits, walk them through the Ncaa process, or at least make sure they know what to be aware of once they step foot on a college campus, to help them, be eligible and stay eligible. And then also to navigating the initial eligibility process is key. I'll walk you through that a little bit here, but it's something that never ends until you actually graduate from high school and you're ready to go on to college. I also like to always put out some statistics. Might be a little bit hard to read, but I think when you decide to go to college from high school and play a sport, you're definitely going against the odds. But it's something that you should be proud of if it's a goal that you're setting for yourself and that you're going to attain. There's over 8 million high school student athletes in the country. 500,000 student athletes participate in college athletics. So you can see sort of the percentages here across the board. So there are a lot of high school student athletes that are their final games, final time putting on the uniform is that senior year. But then the chosens, the lucky few that can move on to college, definitely consider that a privilege and something that they should be proud of. As far as the Ncaa, it's broken up into 3 different divisions. Division I, which Duquesne is considered a Division I institution. I would say there's 3 different levels of Division I. A major program, a high major program like the University of Pittsburgh or WVU. You got your middle tier programs like Duquesne, and then maybe a lower tier like Robert Morris, which all of that is based on size of budgets, sports they offer, resources they provide, scholarship limitations. But Division I in general is considered competitive nationally, and then also to from a scheduling standpoint, not just scheduling within our athletic conferences, but regionally, then also across the country itself. Division II, great examples of Division II college athletic programs. You got locally Slippery Rock, Cal PA, Edinburgh, IUP, Again, very competitive, offer athletic scholarships to student athletes to participate in sports. There's maybe regional competition that really trumps everything else, but again, a good level of college athletic experience for the student athletes that are involved there. Ironically, the level of college that provides the most opportunities with the most schools, with the most sports and the most athletic opportunities is Division III. We've got great examples with CMU, LaRoche, Waynesburg, and WJ locally that really no athletic scholarships can be provided at those levels, which is what sets it apart from Divisions I and II. But you're still looking at a great competitive experience and something that, again, provides the most opportunities when you're talking about playing collegiately. Then we've got, outside of the NCAA, the NAIA, National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, is still made up of four-year colleges. I think the last time I checked, there's about 250 NAIA schools across the country. We've got some locally here too. Still a way for a student athlete to go to college, get a four-year degree, play a sport at a high level. But they've got their own rules, their own eligibility requirements, and it's separate from the NCAA. Then you've got the NJCAA, the National Junior College Athletic Association, which is made up of community college, two-year schools. And that sometimes is a great avenue for student athletes coming out of high school to go to college, get the college experience, still play a sport, graduate, maybe get their associate's degree, or maybe just be there for 1 year and then transition over to a four-year school and continue to play their sport that way too. There's eligibility requirements there, but again, it's another opportunity to continue college experience and the college athletic experience at a different level. So the initial eligibility and the NCAA Eligibility Center process, this is for Divisions I and II only from the NCAA standpoint. So consider that you've got to be certified as being eligible by the NCAA with their requirements prior to coming to college. So when we have a high school student come in as a freshman, they're being certified by the NCAA as being eligible to participate in their sport at whatever level. Once the student athlete's here and is enrolled, has completed a semester or a year, then the university takes on that requirement to certify their eligibility per NCAA rules. But the NCAA does it in a uniform way through the Ncaa Eligibility Center. So the timeline is generally set up for a 4-year period. So 9th grade through 12th grade. And that's that timeline when you're looking to earn courses that can apply towards eligibility certification. We'll get into those a little bit. You're kind of planning on what you need to do to meet NCAA requirements, and then also to working through the process in different stages where you're registering with the Eligibility Center, which I'll get into it a little bit, and then you're also mapping out the courses that you're trying to achieve. And then once you get to your 12th grade year, you're going to graduate, you're going to have test scores on file, you're going to have all of your courses in place, and you're just waiting to finalize that Eligibility Center process. Registering with the Eligibility Center, the question I get sometimes is when should that be done? There's never a time that's too early. Usually 10th or 11th grade, I try to advise students once they start to really consider that they want to play a sport at the collegiate level, Divisions I or II, to register, because it's a one-time registration situation. You do it online. It takes 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes quicker, depending on the information that the NCAA is asking about. You're setting up a file. You're providing information about the sports you're involved in, the schools that you've attended, and anything else as far as your participation in athletics moving forward. There's a fee involved, which is always, when you're dealing with the NCAA, you always get something like that. Currently, it's $90, and I always joke when I first started in this, it was $20. So that was many moons ago. But you pay that one-time fee, then you get an active file that's included in the NCAA's database, and that file is just waiting there for information to go into it, whether it's transcripts, test scores, questionnaires that you're filling out. But also, it's a great resource when you register with the Eligibility Center. They'll send you reminders of a lot of information that you should be aware of as an aspiring Division I, Division II student athlete, which is helpful to maneuver through the process, but then also tap into the information that the NCAA has. Ultimately, you'll hear me say that you want to be considered a qualifier. So when you're going through the NCAA eligibility process and you're going to be certified based on your grades, your GPA, your test scores, you want to be a qualifier, which is your certification that you're eligible for in your first year of college to participate in your sport, practice, compete, and receive financial aid. That final qualifier standard is based on core courses, that each school has set up, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. Meeting a sliding scale that ties into the GPA and a test score if that's available, graduation from high school, and certified as an amateur athlete. So there's an academic element to being a qualifier and being certified by the NCAA, and then there's an amateur element. So all college athletes have to be an amateur, cannot professionalize themselves in any way, and the NCAA will determine that for incoming freshmen as well. The core course requirements. So from a Division I standpoint, if we're talking about our 9th grade through 12th grade timeline, those 4 years to get core courses, the NCAA wants a student athlete to earn at least 16 core courses overall. So when we talk about GPAs and the core course requirements, those core courses are the ones that your school, your high school is considered college preparatory in nature, or that are then considered by the NCAA as being approved to use towards this eligibility certification. And it falls in a different bucket. So it's not just an overall GPA of courses that are used in school on a regular basis, like a cooking class or art class or gym class. Those aren't considered as part of the eligibility certification process. It's really your English, math, your sciences, your social science, your foreign languages, anything that would tie into that. And you can see the buckets that are listed here of those 16 core courses. They want 4 years of English. So basically a year of English for your entire high school career, then 3 years of math, 2 years of science. And then in addition to that, 1 extra year of one of those 3, English, math, or science on top of it. A social science like social studies, history, whatever. And then 4 additional courses that can be any one of those categories, but then also to something that maybe falls into foreign language or religion, philosophy courses, things like that can be what's called an additional core course. So you can see kind of the breakdown here in the 16 core courses. Each high school, and Mrs. Davis will get into it a little bit more, has a list of approved core courses that are specific to the high school that the NCAA has signed off on, and that you would compare with your scheduling throughout your career in high school, and then also what meets NCAA requirements as far as meeting the 16 core course limitation. Standardized test scores, transcripts. Know that when we're dealing with a core course GPA, that's coming directly from your official transcript in high school. Now that has to be sent from your high school directly to the NCAA, which the NCAA headquarters are located in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that, now with the advent of technology, again, can be uploaded electronically. In the past, they would have to send off official documents and things, but now that can be uploaded and get there pretty quickly. Also to the SAT or ACT standardized test scores are really a combination of your best score on those tests, so you can break those up: math, verbal, you've got your sciences, all those scores can be super scored, whether it's separately the SAT or the ACT, in considering what would be used for certification processes from the NCAA. From a submission standpoint, we talked about transcripts have to come directly from the high school. Test scores have to officially come from the testing agency. Now the SAT or ACT offers a way that you can send that electronically, just like you would send, your test scores when you're filling out in your packet for SAT and ACT. You put codes down to have your score sent to a specific college. You can have them sent to the NCAA by putting the code down of 4 nines, and then they'll send that directly from the testing agency to the Ncaa Eligibility Center in Indiana. So that's something that's done. It can't be submitted in any other way. Has to come directly from the testing agency, and something that you're responsible for doing. Upcoming test dates. I know this is a ever-changing process here, and I know every school, every state, every area. I hear a lot of stories about students that can't take tests, but if we're moving forward, these are the national testing dates that are set up right now, and these are the dates of the tests that the NCAA would accept scores from. So, again, the advice would be just like that disclaimer, please, verify testing dates and testing sites, that you register for as we move on throughout the year. But these are still accurate as far as what is set up now, for SAT and ACT. What's interesting, though, when we deal with COVID-19, I'll talk about a couple exceptions coming up. When we're working through the NCAA process of certifying a student athlete as being eligible, the NCAA, at least for this upcoming class, for any student athletes that are going to enroll in the 2021-22 academic year, So this graduating class, you know, the NCAA will not utilize test scores for that. They'll exclude that actually from the process of considering someone as being a qualifier or being certified for this year. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but at least for this, you know, the NCAA provided this exception last year because when we were involved in a shutdown, there were tests that weren't being made available. Students, and we have student athletes on this campus right now that never were able to take a test, couldn't use that for admissions purposes, and also could not use it for eligibility purposes for the NCAA. So the NCAA has given kind of a pass on that, knowing how difficult or how inconsistent that could be. So that's something that can benefit you if you just can't take a test this year. Keep in mind though, too, I'm just talking about this from an eligibility center standpoint. Still some schools, some colleges still require test scores, which I think is challenging. Even here on Duquesne's campus, we have a lot of our schools are test optional, but some of our health sciences are still hopeful that you can possibly get a test score for admissions purposes. And then also for scholarship, you know, and we'll talk about financial aid in a little bit, but you know, certain academic scholarships can be available depending on test scores that are achieved, and you never want to shortchange yourself that way. So if you can take a test, do it. No, from an eligibility center standpoint, not required, but for other things, it's a school by school basis. You should definitely check up on that. Briefly too, when I talk about the test scores, if we were in a normal year, we were using a test score that tied into a GPA for core courses that were earned by a student. The NCAA has this what's called a sliding scale. And briefly, let's use, for example, someone that has maybe a 2.7 core course GPA. If they had that in their 16 core courses, they need at least an 830 on the SAT or a 61 some score on the ACT to be eligible. So and to meet NCAA requirements to be a qualifier. So that's how that works. You can see by this, it's definitely minimizing the test score requirement for eligibility and placing more emphasis on GPA, which is a good thing, especially in this COVID-19 era. So again, just a recap, final qualifier, Division I level, want to have 16 core courses, want to meet you know, the sliding scale requirement if necessary, but also to graduating from high school on time, meeting those requirements to be eligible in their first year. If you don't, it's the student athlete is considered a non-qualifier or somebody that doesn't meet the requirements that the NCAA sets up. The tough part about being a non-qualifier and not meeting those qualifying standards is in that first year of college at the Division I level, you can't practice in your sport, you can't play in games or compete, and you can't receive an athletic scholarship. So at all costs, you want to avoid being considered a non-qualifier for the Division I level. Requirements too that I'll go through real quick. You know, the NCAA, and this kind of plays a role with some of the COVID-19 exceptions, at minimum have a 2.3 GPA in those core courses. That's what the NCAA is looking for. The sliding scale goes to 2.3. It falls below that, and you can have a 2.0 GPA, but then there's this area where you're considered what's called an academic redshirt, whereas you're not meeting all the requirements. Maybe you can practice, maybe you can receive a scholarship, but you can't play in any competitions in your first year. So again, 2.3 is the minimum core course GPA that you're shooting for to be a qualifier at the Division I level. We'll talk about this a little bit more too. Within those 16 core courses, the NCAA wants you to earn at least 10 of them after, you know, through your 11th grade year. So through your junior year, through 6 semesters before you head into your 7th semester of school. You know, you want to have those 10 core courses locked in, and 7 of those 10 have to be English, math, or science. So that comes into play a little bit too with the COVID-19 requirements. Division II has similar initial eligibility requirements when we're talking about being certified as a qualifier, you know, needing the 16 core courses. Their minimum GPA is 2.2 versus a 2.3. They've got the sliding scale as well. It can also be what's called a partial qualifier, meaning you're not meeting all the requirements. You have at least a 2.0 GPA. You're still eligible to practice. You're still eligible to receive scholarship in your first year, but you can't play in your first year. So again, all this certification is just for that first year, that first semester of college enrollment. And then also Division II's got a non-qualifying standard as well if you don't meet either being a qualifier or partial qualifier. Division II requirements fall into the same, you know, buckets as Division I when we're talking about subject matter. Still have the overall 16 core courses. A little bit different in what they're looking for is English, you know, 3 years instead of 4. Math, 2 years instead of 3. still have the same number for natural and physical science. And then also to, the additional years, they want to have, 3 of those in English, math, or science. So kind of spread out a little bit differently, social science 2 years, and then those 4 years of additional core courses, but same timeline, 9th through 12th grade, same number of overall core courses, 16 at the Division II level to be considered a qualifier. Sliding scale here too, if test scores come into play, they have that same situation, but a little bit different when you're dealing with, Divisions 2 and Division 1, but it's still something that has to come into consideration if we're going to look at a test score and a core course GPA at either level. All right, so as far as COVID-19 and how that has affected us and the adjustments that can be applied, the NCAA likes to dub it really flexibility and initial eligibility. So we live in an era where a lot of uncertainty. So when that comes to enrollment in college, and that also based on information and enrollment and courses that are earned in high school, there's some flexibility. So for student athletes that are going to be enrolled in the 2021-22 academic year, there's certain criteria that have to be met to receive scholarship, to be able to practice, and to compete. The NCAA has kind of put that into what's called an automatic waiver or an automatic exception for being enrolled or completing the requirements for eligibility per their standards. This chart kind of breaks it down a little bit between Divisions 1 and 2. Know that we're still kind of working in to be a qualifier, a world of earning 16 core courses overall. But they've set up, instead of a sliding scale with a GPA and test scores, they've done away with the test score at the Division 1 level, like we talked about, and they've just considered, hey, if you've got a 2.3 minimum core course GPA, 16 core courses, you're good to go. You've got your 10 core courses before your junior or before your senior year, you're good. There's different requirements too. You can meet early academic requirements. So going into your senior year, as long as you've got 14 core courses and a GPA over 3.0, you can be certified right away before you even complete courses in your senior year. So you can see where this scale goes a little bit and where this chart is. It really is trying to benefit the student athlete without getting too complicated with GPAs, really kind of set the standard, keep it at that, making sure you're earning core courses overall. That's the most important thing as far as the COVID-19 automatic waivers. And we've seen a lot of student athletes benefit from this, even if they're good students. If it's been a situation where maybe they just didn't have the GPA because of a pass-fail situation, or just wanted to focus on getting the core courses, it's something that has provided them with an exception to be eligible immediately. Also, too, when we're talking about pass-fail, and it's something that was more, I think, involved in the last spring semester, even at the college level, a lot of pass-fail courses there. That's not the end-all to be-all. It doesn't affect really your eligibility certification there. The NCAA would want to provide student athletes with the benefit or the best situation possible when dealing with pass-fail. If a student athlete has a passing grade in a course or a pass designated for their course, they'll at least assign them a value of a 2.3. So if you think that correlates to the minimum GPA requirement for the NCAA, 2.3. So really no harm, no foul. If assigning the GPA at 2.3 would increase their standing, they'll do that. If the 2.3 would decrease it, they'll try to figure out, all right, is there a letter grade, or the NCAA will only use core courses that actually have letter grades if they've got a good student on their hands and looking at a transcript, that could at least show them 16 core courses at the Division I level, 14 at the Division II level, in some circumstances there. But at the very least, they want to give the student athlete the benefit of the doubt. So, this situation will apply for this year only. As things continue to evolve, they might provide the exception for future years. So I want to at least explain that to you. It gets a little confusing, especially each individual high school has different grading situations. Each individual college does as well. But the Eligibility Center is trying to give the benefit of the doubt to the student athlete. Real quick too, with Division III, we've talked about Division I and II going through the Eligibility Center process. No, Division III student athletes don't have to. They don't have to meet initial eligibility standards set up by the NCAA Eligibility Center. That's something where a Division III institution has their own admission standards for their college, and it specifically determines that student athlete's participation for admissions, for financial aid, and for athletic participation. So that individual school will determine if they have a student athlete that can participate at a certain level based on their standards at that individual school. The NCAA doesn't play a role in that in any way. Amateurism certification, real quick, mentioned that the NCAA certifies student athletes as academically eligible and being qualifiers, and then also from an amateurism standpoint. So as a student athlete, when you register with the Eligibility Center, they're going to ask you for information about your sports participation, ask you about different teams that you're on, ask you about any benefits you might have received. What they're trying to do is make sure that in no way you've professionalized yourself or been paid a salary or anything like that, to be a student athlete. And then they'll again ask you those questions throughout the process of you being registered with the NCAA. So at the end of the day, you'll be certified academically and as an amateur by the NCAA. Some quick reminders just to go through, some of the things we covered. To get those test scores sent to the NCAA, you can send, they can send them free from the testing agency by, again, putting those 4 9s in there, 9999, as coding for that information going to the NCAA directly. The student athletes must register with the Ncaa Eligibility Center in order to do certain things. Official recruiting visits. Now, when there's in-person recruiting, that's going to be happening more and more. That's something that can be an official visit can take place during mainly senior years in many sports, but the student athlete has to be registered with the Eligibility Center before they actually take that official visit. Official visit is one where the school is actually paying for some portion of the cost of that recruit coming onto their campus, whether it's transportation, lodging, meals, entertainment, what have you. An official visit is something where being registered with the Eligibility Center is one of the first things that I check to make sure when we're inviting a recruit on campus that they have an active registration. Also, in order to receive an official written athletic scholarship offer in the form of a national letter of intent, which we just had that signing period start up last week. A student athlete has to be registered with the Eligibility Center to receive that official written document sent to them in their senior year. More than likely is when that is prepared for them. So the national letter of intent is generated actually through the Ncaa Eligibility Center, and it's something where a student athlete has to be registered in order to get it. Number 3, if a student athlete attends multiple high schools, the Ncaa Eligibility Center requires that official transcripts from each high school is sent to the NCAA. So, one from North Hills and then maybe another school, that has to be sent separately to the NCAA. They won't take transfer credits on a current transcript or copies of transcripts. They'll want the official document coming from each school that a student athlete has attended. Number 4, the Amateurism Certification talked about registering with the Eligibility Center and answering some questions. In a student athlete's senior year of high school, starting April 1st, they'll get a reminder to actually go back into their account and answer some more questions to close out the Amateurism Certification process. So that happens in your senior year. And then number 5 there is really consult with everybody seeking assistance in this process, whether your guidance counselors who are on the front lines there with everything from your core courses to scheduling out and planning things for you to admissions and eligibility to planning out even fee waivers and submission of information. Just make sure you're falling back on the individuals that are there to help you on the front lines with this process and everyone's tracking. Because like I said, it never ends until you actually graduate from high school, have official transcripts with the NCAA, test scores on file. You could be the best student in the world, but you have to have at least all that information there for the NCAA to make those determinations. Real quick, the financial aid packaging, wanted to just mention this too. When you're going through the Eligibility Center process, when you're going through any type of NCAA consideration for schools that you want to go to, consider financial aid in general, which can come in the form of athletic scholarships that we've talked to, different levels of the NCAA offer athletic scholarships for athletic participation, but also to you're packaging that with academic scholarships, with other type of institutional aid, whether it's academic, need-based, what have you, and then the federal government with FAFSA, with student loans and other work-study opportunities there too. Your academic credentials, as put there on the bottom of the screen, count. So, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more tonight, but the best way to sell yourself to coaches, to package yourself in a way that you're definitely someone they want to recruit, is that you're a good student and can provide financial aid benefits to you, and then also to help them out from a scholarship standpoint, so they can provide aid to you as a student that's worthy of it. The financial aid cycle, your senior year, when you're applying for admissions to schools, make sure you're talking to those schools directly, whether it's, dealing with their financial aid office or admissions to talk about financial aid opportunities, that's fine. Signing up for your federal student aid ID, so you have that information on file, signing up for your FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. That's important too. If you don't think you qualify for it, you want to do that so you can see what potential other financial aid at the institution you can have, or loans that you could take out, things that would benefit you, chipping away at the overall cost of college expenses there too. So, the FAFSA is important. That's something where you can sign up for that as early as October 1st prior to going into college. When you're submitting, they're real flexible now with taking 2 years out of income tax information that has to be submitted on behalf of the family. And there's sort of a deadline from a university standpoint, which is always different, but I would say May 1st, when you're getting into the spring months, you want to have that information submitted to the school that you're going to so that they can package your financial aid to the best of their ability from a timing standpoint. And again, work with each individual school from an aid application standpoint, from an admission standpoint, to make sure you're clearing the financial aid hurdles there. Last thing is just with the resources from the NCAA. We've talked a lot about, the information tonight that you've got, but when you register with the Eligibility Center, and even when you just go on ncaa.org, the website, they've got a ton of resources available to student athletes about how, even how COVID-19 has affected the eligibility process or being a student athlete, to, what sports you want to play, what schools offer those sports, what scholarships are offered at those schools, the eligibility process, the national letter of intent process. Just anything and everything is at your disposal through the NCAA. They do a really good job of getting that information out. That's timely, it's easy to read, and it's something that's worthwhile to go through. Any questions at all for me? I know I threw a lot of information out. If you don't want to right now, I'm staying on throughout the duration of the program, so it can be at any time and even after. Okay. All right. I'm gonna stop share from my end.
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. And that's a lot of valuable information. I know that, again, all of that stuff is accessible online, and you can look at it. And if anyone does have any questions as we move forward, you could use the chat feature to make sure that we can address those throughout the program, or you can hold them till the end and we can get through that. But I appreciate all of that information from the NCAA level. So we'll step down to our level in the high school. And Mrs. Davis, I'll turn it over to you so she can talk about a little bit more of the academics, and a little bit, actually, if she can talk about her perspective as well as, a parent of a recruited athlete very recently. So Mrs. Davis.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So I am going to share my screen too, and try to make this, okay, Rick, it says I'm not back to the host yet. Do you take me over? Okay, well, can you hear me okay? I'll just have to talk then. So the program of studies that we follow is posted on the North Hills website under education, or academics rather, at the top. So you wouldn't necessarily look under high school. Oh, I'm back as the host now. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So I'm going to share my screen here with you so you can see what I've got going on. Okay. So if you go to the North Hills website, you go under academics, there's a program of studies. And there is the high school and the middle school program of studies, but we would focus on the high school. So any of you who are in 8th grade now, you're here tonight with the purpose of starting to think about how you might be scheduling for your high school courses. So my goal would be to help you understand how does the courses you select here at North Hills fit with all those 16 core course requirements that Mr. Christensen was talking about. So if you ever go to the high school, to the program of studies, You will have a large document. I hope I'm not making anybody sick here, moving this up and down. But this is our program of studies, and in addition to having the course description for everything that goes on here, all of our curriculum, we have a lot of our programs highlighted in there, and including, we look at, and let's go right back up here, it's page 13, I believe, or 12, with under all of our special programs, we have, here we go, Ncaa requirements. And we actually have gone as far as putting those 2 pages that Mr. Christensen shared with you in our program of study. So you'll have this to refer to as you're doing your scheduling over your 9th, 10th, and 11th grade years. When you select our courses, you'll notice that not, like Mr. Christensen said, not every class counts. So you're going to be focusing on core courses that we have for graduation, like your English, Math, Social Studies, and Science. Just like you do for us, you'll do that for the Ncaa. They have a large list of all of our courses that we've submitted to them that they approve to count towards their course. I'm just showing you this so you understand, like, we have a lot of options to fill those core courses. I don't expect you to need to have the access to this document per se or memorize all of this, but I want you to feel secure that our kids meet their requirements pretty much with ease by doing their worksheets and doing what they need to do to graduate for North Hills. They coincide a lot. So if you and I, or if your child and I were sitting down and looking at, I would start with a Division I worksheet largely because that's the hardest academics to meet. So if we can meet those, we know we're going to meet the others. We have a core course requirement at North Hills to graduate of 4 years of English. So right here, we've put all your 9, 10, 11, 12, and that will meet that easily. For math, we have 3 years of math, and they need 3 years. So there we go, 9, 10, and 11 right there. We have 3 years we require science. They only require 2. So we put our 2 is in here. And then your next requirement is an additional year in English, Math, or Science. There's that 3rd year of science. Boom, you got those done. Social sciences, those are your social studies classes. We require 4 years. They require 2. So go in here. And then we need additional 4 years. You put those 2 extra social studies in there. You pick up another math, another science, 2 years of a language, and you meet it without any trouble. So I don't want anyone to panic that we aren't able to get you there. We certainly can offer you the opportunities. There are some exceptions. There are some of our courses that are not fully accepted or may only get partial credit for. So for example, we'll have some students that will take a biology A and a biology B. Biology is only accepted once at Ncaa, so they will give you a half credit with each of those. So little things like that, that's where you and your school counselor can be talking as we go to make sure that we are picking all the core courses that you need. But honestly, if you're doing fine at North Hills, you're likely going to have no problem meeting these requirements. At the top of this worksheet, you'll see that they use a scale of 4 quality points for an A, 3 for a B, C for a 2, D for a 1. So while we have pluses and minuses, if you had an A minus, if you had a B minus, it's going to be an A or a B for the purpose of figuring out your core GPA for your Division I worksheet or your Division II worksheet. So the cumulative GPA that you would see on your child's transcript is a different number. That's going to include all of the coursework they've ever taken, but this would figure out a GPA that's specifically related to their core courses. So that in a nutshell is, how we would help you track and why we wanted to have kids understand as early as going into 9th grade that there are certain things that you really need to be taking seriously with your coursework. So if you're that kid that says, I don't want to take a 4th year of math, or I'm just going to take the minimum amount of science, or I don't want to take a foreign language, this is the time that you may want to reconsider those kind of decisions now so that they don't wind up coming back to bite you later. The hardest that you work on the field, you have to work that hard, if not harder, in the classroom. secure these grades, and then that won't be anything that has to stand in your way of being the recruit that you want to be. So, I don't know, Mr. Weber, if you think there's anything else as far as academics there that you wanted me to touch upon, but I think that probably summarizes where we would be as, school counselors, a resource, to go over this with anybody at any time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're looking for. And we just want everyone to know that's on the meeting that you are able to sit down with your counselor and sort of map this out. Again, we want you to start with the program of studies and think about that because all that information is there. But as you get into your, sophomore and junior, senior year and athletics and college are more of a realistic opportunity for you, you're going to sit down and you're going to do that worksheet. And like Mrs. Davis said, most of the time, we're filling out that worksheet with ease because of our core courses that we're requiring you to take are somewhat tougher, I guess is the word I'm looking for, than what the eligibility requirements are going to be. So we rarely run into an issue with a student athlete that's not going to qualify, as Rick said earlier, for a Division I or Division II school once it gets to that point.
On an occasion, we'll have a student that does not pass a class and they go to summer school. Our summer school is only a remedial class that allows you to kind of recoup that grade to passing, but it is not a full repeat of the class. So the NCAA will not necessarily accept that as a credit. So that's another reason, though, to make sure you're doing well doing school, and we don't have to look to summer school grades to take care of meeting those things. But for the most part, if you're doing well in your classwork in 9th and 10th grade, it's going to lead into naturally good things in 11th. You can sign up for the NCAA eligibility anytime. Like Mr. Christensen said, the biggest benefit as far as transcript, we usually don't send your transcript till the end of your junior year. Because that is time when they're going to be able to see whether you meet those pre-qualifying kind of standards. And you can talk to coaches without having your transcript on file. And it's not unusual at all for us to be asked to send college coaches unofficial transcripts as they're starting to talk to kids. But that would certainly have to be a required part of getting everything ready for that actual offer and accepting to play at that level. So, as far as just being a parent of a recent recruit, I have a freshman at Bryant University. It's a small Division I program in Rhode Island. He plays lacrosse, and it was an exciting ride. It's a lot of work on their part to be recruited at a D1 or D2 program, play D3 programs. I mean, every level is very competitive. Let's face it, when you saw that screen of how many people go from high school sports up to the college level. There is definitely a large percentage of kids that play in high school that are never going to get to college. So every level is competitive and it's exciting. And the recruiting process can be grueling. You can do a lot of it yourself. You don't have to pay for a lot of services, is what I found. Some people prefer to do that. But it is really key responsibility of you and your child to make the most of getting themselves out there and making themselves known and awareness. People aren't going to find you. You have to make yourself stand out. I really believe that's to be the case. So I'd be happy to talk with anybody, on the phone or Zoom with you if you want to talk parent to parent at any time.
Thanks, Mrs. Davis.
Sure.
I will, and if you have to jump in here while I talk about recruiting, sort of the last piece into this evening is hopefully I'll take about 15 or so minutes just to talk about some of the recruiting things. Fortunately, I was able to play at the Division I level. I played football at Penn State, and that was, I guess I'm getting old. It was pretty while ago, and I know it's painful to say that right now, the way they're struggling, but yeah, I was fortunate enough to play at the Division I level. And I think really what I want to talk about is, what coaches look for and how kids get recruited. in today's day and age, I think that a lot of student athletes think that Division One is Division One or bust, and that's the way that I feel. But again, there's Division Two schools, Division Three schools that are competitive, and they have great academic programs. Schools are going to find you, and you have to market yourself. But what are the college coaches looking for? Number one, they're looking for someone that fits their mold, someone that is academically, obviously, strong there and can fit that what they want with their institution. Number one, looking at the test scores right now, we know that that's up in the air, but moving past that, they're going to look at those test scores and those grades mainly. Number two, I think they look at the total person. I've been with recruiters that come into our building and they will ask for me to take them to the cafeteria, and I've taken them to the cafeteria and they asked the workers in the cafeteria, what is this student like in the cafeteria? Please, thank you. Yes, sir. No, sir. Are they polite? What type of kid are they outside of the classroom, outside of the playing field, just in the school in general? So they're looking at what type of person, that they are. And I think, as piggybacking off of that, is social media. And I know that we're all on social media. You can market yourself on social media. It can be very positive, but colleges and college coaches can look up your social media accounts and see exactly what you're putting out there and what you're all about. So putting that in a positive light can help you, but putting it in a negative light, I've heard instances that that's how kids unfortunately don't get recruited anymore, and puts them in a bind. So you have to think about that. So what are the college coaches looking for? They're looking for all these things, and I think they're looking for an athletic fit to their standard. You have to be realistic with yourself. Where do I stand out? There are schools that their recruiting classes are looking for certain positions. There are schools that are looking for positions that have to meet certain height and weight standards. There are schools that are looking for certain times, different things for different sports, and that criteria all plays a role. And I always say the last thing is, even though athletics is a huge part of, everyone that's on here and really, plays a role in all of our lives, you have to look at what a school is going to be if athletics unfortunately ends. If you are injured, if something happens in your career, are you going to be happy at that school? So that's really important as you start your recruiting journey and think about college and playing there, because I've played against and played beside a lot of other guys who, they weren't happy and they transferred out because, they came to play football and unfortunately it didn't work and they weren't happy with the school and the location. So you have to think about those things as well. A couple other things I want to mention about recruiting. Again, I said that recruiters do come in our buildings and they do contact coaches more than they would me. There are some coaches and schools that will come to me that will look for our coaches' information because they're the ones on the front lines that know our athletes a little better than, what I may or have that information. So they lean on them. There are coaches that market our athletes all the time. Like Mrs. Davis did mention, there are times where coaches will ask us for these transcripts and they give coaches GPA. Coach will look at that GPA and they're not going to look past that. Maybe I can't recruit this kid because this is where they stand academically. So again, the recruiters are out there, but again, we talked about some different things where you can market yourself. And I do want to talk about just some different terms that you may hear out there in the dead period, quiet period, some different things in recruiting. So, a dead period, it sounds like you can't communicate at that point, but you can't have in person. Am I right, Mr. Christensen? And not in person contact with the coach, but they can still social media, they can text you. It could be more digital communication. So they can't, as much as it's said that they can't do anything, but more of in-person stuff with that. You may have heard the term quiet period. Now that's a little bit different. This is when coaches can't come seek you out. They can't come to you, come to the school, come to a game, things like that. Anywhere that's outside of campus. I think the one example was in a grocery store. They can't seek you out and meet you somewhere But if you're on campus, they can speak with you, but you're able to phone calls and things like that with a quiet period. And again, I think it's important that you get on schools' campuses. Mrs. Davis could probably attest to that. Her son and her and, her husband and their family visited a lot of campuses. Go and check it out. You're allowed to alert the coach if he or she is permitted to touch base with you. They know these rules. They're not going to play out of bounds because they don't put anything that they can't eligibility wise in jeopardy. But if you're on a campus and you talk to a coach and say that you're going to be there, but the more important, again, go take a tour, walk around, see what classrooms look like. All in all, you're a regular student when it comes down to it, that ends up playing in athletics. So talk about difference. I know Mr. Christensen mentioned about official visits. You talk about official visits at the Division I and the Division II level. These are visits that the schools are inviting you that they can pay for that. And that's what Mr. Christensen alluded to. They can pay for you to be on their campus. You only get 5 of them, and you can only go 1 per school at those levels. Again, they're paying for your transportation. They're paying for things that your lodging, things along those lines where, a lot of those expenses, because they're recruiting you to be there. Most of the time, and again, that can only happen really, in your junior, senior years there, date-wise. Unofficial visits are the opposite of that, where you can go on unofficial visits where you're paying your own dime. You can visit the schools and you can contact them. And those are really unlimited at that point. So they can, and I guess there's a new rule, Mr. Christensen, I guess May of 2019 with the unofficial visits. Do you know that a little bit more than I do?
I mean, as far as the amount of visits, or just the
just that I guess you can't now until August 1st of your junior year that you're not.
There's a lot of sports that have tried to curb the early recruiting for students, so they want to cut off all contact with the prospective student athlete until they're actually going into their junior year. So that's key. Mainly those sports we're talking about September 1, going into junior year. And that's when you can have the communication via email, phone calls, whatever, but then that in person, whether it's on campus visits, off campus evaluations and things like that, that's when it ramps up. And at the Division I, that's mainly when that happens per sport, but a lot of sports across the board, they put in those new early recruiting rules there.
Yeah, I think that's more what I had seen, just because they're curbing the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that are getting the scholarship offers at that point. And again, on that same note, I think you should understand the difference between a verbal commitment and an official commitment when you're signing. You're not really committed to that school unless you sign that national letter of intent. So you can verbally commit to a school, but that is not a binding agreement unless that, you have that letter that is signed at the Division I and Division II level. So that is important to know, because you can hear of student athletes getting making these commitments, but it's not really a binding agreement until you put the pen to the paper, for lack of better terms. The last thing that I do want to leave you guys with is, and Mrs. Davis touched on this, is marketing yourself. As an athlete, I think you start to think about schools that you want to go to, going back to what major, what school's a fit for you. You think about those things. Is this a school that you can potentially play at? Can you compete there? Is it a fit because that is at your skill level? Again, setting that realistic expectation. But as an athlete, you want to reach out to those schools, realistically. So a lot of schools have prospective questionnaires for their sports teams that are available on their websites. Do research. You are more than welcome to, as a student athlete, from your email, and you send the coach a note and you talk about recruiting and where you are and marketing your own self. talk about it, fill out those questionnaires. The other thing is once you start to play and everyone has the ability, you make a small video clip of yourself. Once the recruiting gets going, you can push that out to numerous coaches. It could be some highlights. It can be, different things that in your sport specific that you're pushing out to coaches, so they are aware of who you are. Adding those, not just statistics off the field, but adding your GPAs, your test scores. Those different things are also going to help market yourself in a message that's appropriate to a coach at an appropriate level. We talk about, there's a ton of recruiting services out there, and really, I think you can market yourself. Not a huge believer in those. Your coaches can market you. You can market yourself individually. The recruiting services, they do, they want you to buy into their company to spend money. And, there are ways that you can do that on your own without spending, hundreds of dollars to do that. So that's important. You can do a lot of that stuff individually. And lastly, again, the biggest thing is I can't express enough is being realistic. We talk about the amount of scholarships. And again, if we're talking Division I football, they have 85 scholarships. We're talking Division I AA, which is now the FCS. They have 63 scholarships, I believe. And you talk about a Division I baseball school, they have 12 scholarships. So some of these programs, basketball has 13 scholarships. Mrs. Davis, how many scholarships does Bryant offer for lacrosse? Do you know that?
Not really sure. I want to say they may be around 12 also. They divide it up, though. When you say how many scholarships, it doesn't mean that 12 kids on the team get a full scholarship. It may mean that they divide that monies up amongst others. And there are definitely some schools out there that I think have some alumni help and support in making sure there's monies available for kids. But you don't go into Division I school unless you're, all-star basketball or football probably, and think you're going to get a full ride, especially as a freshman.
Yeah, and I think, that is important. Like Mrs. Davis said, there are those amount of scholarships. Typically in those sports, I think some of the smaller sports, you do see them dividing up that monies across their roster to, help a lot of the kids out instead of, just a select few and using all of their, their scholarship money. So that is very common. That might not be as common as, as football. I don't feel that is as common. Most of the student athletes, are going there and they're going to be on a full scholarship, or they'll earn one at some point. But it's just a perspective. Division II, there are, you can get athletic monies, but there's a lot of schools that will give you academic monies on top of that, and you can get a great package from a lot of those Division II schools. And again, Division III, you're a strong academic kid. You can definitely make a nice package for yourself to help you financially whenever you're looking at schools. So those are just some of the pointers that I have, again, from recruitability, making yourself marketable. At this point, I guess we can open it up to any questions that anyone has for a few minutes, and we can go from there. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask away, or you can type in the chat box to everyone and we'll sort of field it as they come in.
While we're waiting for people to formulate their questions, one of the things that I think Mr. Weber can be a great resource to your kids about is to help, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and ask him about something that you're considering having your child attend. There's some sports, swimmers and maybe runners and things that is based on times, but there are other team sports, your basketball, football, lacrosse is my personal experience, is where, you have to build your video, you have to have your people watch you play. And so there are a lot of opportunities or invitations to go to showcases. And some of these showcases are very much money-making events with very little opportunity for your child to actually get seen. So I think having a real good conversation with Mr. Weber and doing some research to make sure that you're selecting events that are going to be meaningful to your child. For us personally, we found that that meant going to smaller showcases along college campuses where he was really interested, and that they usually would have other coaches from similar schools and similar levels there. And that was a much more effective use of our time and money in having him seen than going to some of these large, showcases or workshops with expert, with professional lacrosse or D1 players or something, whereas you may learn some good skills, but you may not really get a whole lot of actual eye time there. So I'm not seeing any questions. We have 17 participants still on with us, so hopefully, we'll give you another minute or two to add your voice to the evening.
And just to follow up on some points there too, in dealing with our coaches as well, when we're talking about highlight videos or sending things in, our coaches want to see some real raw footage. They want to see, full games or matches. I always remember my tennis coach says they want to see the match. They want to see when the athlete's down and fighting for points rather than just winning easily or, having an isolated camera shot on them, hitting some balls back and forth. So things like that are important when it comes to the visits. That Mrs. Davis, Mr. Weber said, that's a selling point not only for the school but also for the recruit as well. So the student athlete should be prepared with questions, prepared with giving a good handshake, looking them in the eye, and kind of making sure that they're presenting themselves in a manner that that coach wants to continue to recruit them now that they're in person and they're conversing a lot. And then also to those unofficial visits that Mr. Weber talked about, that can also have a non-athletic theme to them as well. We have a lot of students that'll come and go into the classroom and, maybe just meet with a faculty member or just walk around campus, maybe check a practice, but not really make themselves known. Just sort of figure out, all right, on a rainy day, is this a campus that I want to go to point A to B from? And, still be kind of, get an assessment of what the college life would be at that school. So a lot of things to take into consideration on the recruiting side of it. And then the last thing was scholarships. We've got student athletes, even at the Division I level, that are on a varying level of scholarships, whether it's the amount that they can have on a sport team, that can be spread out across all student athletes on that team. I can think back, our soccer team right now has student athletes that get a pretty good amount of money, maybe covering all their tuition. And then we have a lot that are just on a book scholarship or on a couple $1,000s. And that's something, or a meal plan. And that's something they're willing to continue to participate in their sport. It's part of their financial package. But it's a scholarship that's important to them and something that our coaches can give them too. So.
Rick, one of the things you just said sparked something for me too, is when you are looking at colleges and like he said, go around, walk around the campuses, look at their academic buildings, look at their housing facilities, look at the programs and the majors that they have. Make sure your child is happy there for all those reasons, not just because of the sport and especially not just because of the coach, because coaches change. And you want to love the coach, obviously. You want to have someone that you think is going to be a mentor to your child and do great things and give them an opportunity, that is just something you've been working for years. But coaches do change. So, my son had been early on was being recruited at Penn. The head coach went to Lafayette and the assistant coach went to Bucknell, and Penn stopped talking to him. So, things change very quickly that way. He started talking to them at the other schools. But it's a whirlwind experience. You'll find coaching staff changes. And so don't just get hung up on the coach or that particular meeting. Make sure you really like the school.
Absolutely. That's always something that I say, because all those things can change, and that's important. So you have to have the right fit, and ultimately you have to understand that athletics at some point ends at someday, and you have to, you're going to relish that degree and come out of there and be successful. So, you're going to look back on your college days and have a degree when you come out and enter the workforce. So that's the main goal, really, and when you think about it as you go through. So it doesn't look like we have any questions. So I want to say thank you to everyone that came on and made this opportunity. Special thanks to Mr. Christensen and Mrs. Davis again for organizing their presentations. Mr. Christensen is a great resource for us. He is always willing to help us out and does this annually for us every year at North Hills, and we're very grateful for that. But he also will make himself available for questions like you said earlier. So if there is anything, feel free to reach out to him or, reach out to one of us, Mrs. Davis or myself, if you have any specific questions moving forward. But again, thanks to everyone. And this will be the end of the presentation. And we appreciate your time being on here with us. So thank you.
Thank you.